from IBM to be made by Mr. Devesh Ranjan, Technical Sales Lead, and he's going to talk about insight, investigation and analysis, securing the perimeter. Mr. Ranjan.
Good evening, everyone. We had a very interesting roundtable just before the session, nearly on the same subject. And I think we could not conclude finally that what should be an end-to-end, but it gives me an opportunity here to maybe discuss something around what could be the potential solution components that are critical or essential for an end-to-end fraud management part. Typically, whenever we talk about fraud management, there are many buzzwords that keep cropping up. I mean, fraud, analytics, crime, intelligence, big data is there. Yeah, thank you. So, big data crops up. We have been discussing about insider fraud, things around most of these applications going to the mobile platform. So, elements of cyber intelligence coming into picture. Yes, definitely, when we talk about the end-to-end fraud management solution, all these have to be taken into cognizance. The critical thing that we need to understand is, I mean, how do we prioritize? Which are the areas where do we draw the focus? This again would be dependent on basically what are the areas where, I mean, in terms of the fraud, the impact is maximum. And by addressing which specific areas can we mitigate or minimize the risks that are being faced by the specific organization. During this entire fraud landscape or the solution that we are going to implement, we also need to understand very critical things. The fraudster, we have seen that over a period of time, the way fraud is happening, the way attacks are happening, threat actors, vectors, these are constantly changing, adapting as and when the technology is growing, so is the attack becoming more and more complicated. So how exactly these fraudsters are constantly adapting? What are the new ways? What are the various ways they are monitoring your infrastructure or maybe trying to penetrate across it? How are they trying to identify the vulnerabilities that might exist within your organization? That is definitely one of the things that needs to be put into cognizance. Besides this, the second aspect would be you cannot treat fraud management in a siloed manner. I mean, you cannot take maybe the cyber intelligence part or maybe the financial fraud analytics or certain other critical parts as separate instances. You need to have an enterprise approach, addressing, cutting across all these multiple channels, cutting across all these various business units. You need to have a single unified view, either whether it is the individual or whether it is the customer. What exactly is that individual doing in a particular channel, in a particular business unit? What are his various other identities that are existing within my organization? And the solution itself might not just be the only thing. This entire thing has to be taken as a strategy. So from an organization's perspective, there has to be a well-defined, laid-out strategy which drives the common areas for identifying fraud, mitigating fraud across the entire organization. So while we are talking about this end-to-end approach, we need to understand what could be the various areas, how exactly the fraud is happening. So it could be organized fraud or it could be individual fraud. Definitely individual fraud is something wherein we might have to do a cost-benefit analysis. Vis-a-vis organized fraud, something which might be affecting the total, the risk associated with those kinds of frauds. Similarly, from a insider vis-a-vis outsider perspective, so the risk associated with the insider fraud, people have within the organization having access to data, that becomes very critical while putting together this entire solution. Taking into this entire thing into effect, the entire solution needs to take all these aspects. While putting together the solution, you have to take into account components which address your detection piece, which address your response piece. So how do you detect in real time or near real time scenario how the fraud is happening, what are the changes, how they are affecting your specific organizational database. You need to have some kind of a risk-based or a rule-based response. What should be the response based on the kind of activity or the action that has taken place? How do I do a post-incident investigation? What would be the various tools and technologies that can assist or aid in quickly investigating those scenarios, finding out the common elements across these multiple silos or those multiple layers of data? And then during this investigation, it should also lead to pattern discovery. I mean, since the way the fraud is happening is changing, the fraudsters are adapting. So it also is something which is very essential on our part, that we need to constantly discover the new ways these attacks are happening. And that discovery as a knowledge should go back into your existing rule engine. So putting together this entire solution, there are some set of, at a minimum, the critical components which you will need to put forth. Things like identity or the entity analytics or identity resolution, like how exactly one identity is represented across various segments or verticals within my organization or within another organization. Doing a contextual or a behavioral analytics. We were discussing about the fact that customer awareness is very low in India. And maybe from any banking perspective, we are sending across various messages to the people that they should avoid sharing passwords, various other things from education perspective. But then, yes, there was a very interesting fact that we need to have a proper classification of those customers. So you need to have a behavioral classification, a zonal-wise classification. So customer segmentation needs to be done, and based on that segmentation, there has to be a targeted education or awareness campaign that needs to be put forth. Then, yes, while you are connecting data from all these different places, so definitely the data volume would be a very big challenge. So aspects of big data would come into picture. Unstructured data, whether it is banking transactions or talking about insurance, unstructured textual analysis, content analytics, this would be essentially very critical. Decision management based on the risks identified, what would be the decision support system that is there in place, that would be another critical component. But apart from all these things, these are things that would definitely work in the backdrop, ensuring that this fraud management, mitigation, detection is taken care of. But another very critical part is post-detection or post the risk identification. How do we do some kind of a forensic analysis? How does my analyst understand the various connections or the networks that are developing? It could be cyber network. There would be cases where you might want a particular attack to go through and then understand that what was the threat vector, who are the actors. So understanding those chains, understanding that pattern is something very critical. Just before I end my session, I'll just play a small video snippet. I mean, what would be the various tools and snippets for doing this kind of a link analysis?
Meet Jane. Once an employee at a large bank, she is now serving 5 years for fraud. So how was she caught? It began when the bank's own pattern recognition engine noticed consistent changes in behavior across several accounts. Verifying whether anomalies like these are a threat involves collating, dissecting, and analyzing huge volumes of data that is often stored in various databases across multiple channels, offices, and countries. A task that, without the right tools, can be very time-consuming. However, Using I2 solutions, investigators were able to quickly import all the information relating to those accounts into one repository. I2's superior analytical capabilities enabled the investigators to discover that many of the accounts held by customers all over the world were each transferring $5 into the same deposit account every week. The bank's investigators didn't recognize the name associated with the account receiving the funds, but they did recognize the IP address associated with the logins to it. It was the bank's own IP. So the next step was to find out which employees had access to the suspect deposit account. The investigators quickly pooled the HR records, email, and telephone traffic data related to those employees into a central repository for further analysis. Here they were able to collectively review the employees' emails by date, recipient, and even subject line, linking and matching key entities, dates, and even text to quickly uncover suspicious patterns. For instance, they discovered that one employee always sent an email to the same recipient on the days of the $5 transfers. That employee was Jane. Leveraging the advanced search and analytical capabilities of I2 Solutions, they were able to quickly drill down into Jane's network activity. This showed that she had sent emails to those customers who were having $5 withdrawn from their accounts. The emails looked legitimate and asked the recipients to update their personal information. The customers that replied matched the accounts in question. Armed with this information, Jane's employer was able to provide law enforcement officials with critical knowledge that enabled them to disrupt a phishing and money laundering scheme conducted not only by one of the bank's own employees, but in conjunction with a criminal network. Without the right tools, analyzing the volumes and layers of fraud transactional data that is often stored across channels, offices, and countries can be overwhelming. But with I2 technology, you will be able to break through those silos and access, organize, and transform that data into patterns, trends, and insights, providing you with a complete picture and leaving fraudsters nowhere to hide. After all, it's the same technology that law enforcement, defense, national security agencies, and the commercial sector around the world rely on today to deconstruct criminal networks and find entities of interest. Contact I2 today and protect your business from internal and external threats.
So definitely, I would like to open up just for any kind of questions that you have, or we take the questions and then.
I just wanted to ask you one question, and then maybe we can go to the next one and then. So I speak bit louder, but you have two solutions. One which is I2, and the other for analytics, and the other which is IBM QRadar, right? And there was also a question early in the morning on how technology can solve the problem of analytics and big data, right? So my question really is, under what circumstances customers should go I2 route for analytics, and under what circumstances should they choose a QRadar route?
So first of all, thank you, and I will take it in a positive way that you are naming out many of those IBM products which customers might not have been aware of. In fact, just to make it even more complicated, so maybe you talked about QRadar. We are also talking about Trustier. Now with the mobile devices coming into picture, Trustier is another platform. How do I ensure that my endpoint devices, where maybe a banking application is getting deployed, any kind of app, mobile app, that app is secure, it is not, there is no malicious malware present on that app. So definitely QRadar comes more from a SIM perspective, which is monitoring any kind of cyber activity that is happening within the bank's network, or any kind of network flow that is coming from outside. That is one aspect when it comes to the cyber part. You can do a cyber monitoring definitely based on the network flow. The second aspect which I talked about is coming from Trustier, things like ensuring that there is no malicious or malware or malicious footprint available on my endpoint customer devices. But all this data, these are again silos, I would say, just like the information silos might be a savings or various financial units within a bank. These are also from an IT perspective information silos. Where IT actually comes into picture is integrating across all these things. So from financial perspective, integrating those multiple channels. From an IT perspective, integrating these channels with the non-IT part of data, financial data, with the IT data, that is the cyber part, with maybe something which is even a non-IT data, something like HR records or email transactions, things which are maybe you could even have information coming from threat intelligence providers. So correlating context, relating the context across all these things is something where I2 comes into picture. So I2 as an analytical layer works at the top, wherein these would be the three ingredients depending on what are the specific areas that any organization is trying to address.
Could you illustrate how you work on email traffic? For example, to make figure out if the person has sent email work, how would that work?
So again, okay. Within the I2 platform, we have something called enterprise intelligence analysis, whereas there is one component which does more just like a search engine, a crawler. It has a crawler which can go to most of your mail servers. So it does a content monitoring, who the mail is sent to, who is the sender, who is the recipient, what is the subject, what is the attachment size. Beyond that, what is the text? So when it comes to unstructured data, they're definitely based on the specific organization's intention or maybe the specific kind of things that you want to monitor. It can do a textual analysis or a content and a context analysis of the text that is written, and anything that is suspicious, you can then take it for subsequent investigation over there.